James, we are ready, yeah? Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight. I would like to start by thanking those who came to our demonstration in London last Friday, which was to support Palestinians in all areas of Palestine and in the diaspora, but in particular, it was linked to this webinar because the subject was the same. We were talking about Sheikh Jarrah, we were talking about Naqab on that evening, as well as remembering the Palestinians who actually died last week, including an elderly icon of resistance, peaceful resistance, who died, unfortunately, last week as well. So before we start, I just wanted to report to you on a couple of on administrative detainee, because he's in the news at the moment. His name is Amal Nakhle, who has been in detention for 18 months. 18 months ago, he was a child, so he was under the age of 18, but he turned 18 earlier this week, and he's in administrative detention. He suffers from an autoimmune disease, and the Israelis were warned that he was susceptible particularly to COVID. Unfortunately, a couple of days ago, he did catch COVID, and today he was moved to an Israeli hospital. So again, a child in detention, ill, but the Israelis still detained him with no evidence. As you know, administrative detention, they don't have any evidence, and unfortunately, he has contracted COVID and has been moved to hospital. So we wish Amal well, and we call for him to be released without any delay. Okay, to the subject of this evening. First of all, my name is Kamel Hawash, and I'm the chair of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. I'm also originally from Jerusalem, and when we come to talk about protests, particularly in Sheikh Jarrah, I'll have something to say which is related to that. We're here to continue to raise the voice of the Palestinian people because the governments, the UK government, the EU and the US, completely side with Israel. The best they can do is to go and have selfies and photographs taken, supposedly in solidarity with people in Sheikh Jarrah, and the Naqab is different because they consider that Israel and therefore it's different. But certainly the British Consul General was having her photographs taken with people outside the Salhiya family's home that was about to be demolished. And you think, and their house, the consulate is not far from there. So it's important that we continue to support the Palestinian people and to raise their voice. So the Palestinians are resisting the Israeli land grab, and that is the reason for this particular webinar. And I'm really pleased that we have some fantastic speakers to tell you more about the background, particularly in the Naqab. And we also have a voice who will tell us about how the Palestinians are protesting and resisting. And then finally, what we are doing in the UK here about this as, Palestine Solidarity Campaign and others, a campaign against the JNF. So without further ado, the way we're going to run this, first of all, I ask you all to be, if you comment or if you put anything in the chat, to be respectful. We are an anti-racist organization, so again, we don't want any comments that breach that. We want to do this respectfully. We want people, even those who side with Israel, who are watching, to hopefully learn something. They probably will not learn anything, but that's what we try to do, is to educate and to raise the voice of the Palestinians. I'm really pleased to have 4 speakers today. Annie O'Gara will speak at the end. Budour Hassan, again, will come just before her, and Dr. Ahmed Amara, who will speak after our first speaker. I'm really delighted. We're honored to have Dr. Salman Abu Sitta, who is not only the president of the Palestine Land Society, but he's also a patron of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And to the Palestinian people, he is an icon. So we are very pleased and privileged to have him speak to us tonight. So Salman will start by giving us a historical perspective to get us going. So Salman, over to you. And I know he'll be sharing some maps, and we'd be ready to help with that. So Dr. Salman Abu Sitta.
Thank you, Kamel, very much. And thanks for my friends in PSC for organizing this. It's a very important event. and very important subject because we are seeing a crime being enacted in front of our eyes. But before I start, I think I would like to make one comment, maybe two. One of them is that it is ironical that now we are speaking about a charity organization accused quite rightly of robbery. How could you really have that? An organization registered in 55 countries as charity organization is actually committing an act of robbery of a land they don't own. There is also a bigger irony. I am now contesting settlers, Polish, Russian settlers who came from the cold hills of Russia, and they are contesting my right in my land, in which my family lived for hundreds of years. Let me show you a document from the Ottoman archives. Can we see the first document, please? Can we see that? Could someone? Yes. This document from the Ottoman archives shows the sheikhs of Beersheba getting together, cooperating together in peace about their life and their land. And on the bottom right-hand corner, there is the name of Sheikh Dahshan Abu Sitta, who my great-great-great-grandfather who owned this land. If I have to prove, the document, by the way, is dated 1840. If I have to prove that I lived at least, or my family lived since 1840 to a Russian or Polish person who came to my land in a smuggler ship in the middle of the night, this is the extreme case of irony. Tragedy, actually, tragedy. How can I prove to someone who came from Russia that my great-great-great-father, whose name is mentioned in this document, doesn't have a land and doesn't live in that land? But that is the case we live with today. The denial of the truth is a crime which is being enacted every day. Now, we can even go further than my great-great-great-father, 1840. The Ottoman Register of 1596 mentions places in Beersheba in which people cultivate their land and they pay their taxes. This document describes how many people live in one place, what they grow, and how much taxes they have to pay. There is an important event in 1858 when the Ottoman land law was enacted, and it said that the people who pay taxes, they own the land, and even the land which is not cultivated, that is the land in the wilderness, which is one horse ride away from habitation, they can actually cultivate the land and then it becomes theirs. And this is called Mawat land, that land not cultivated in the wilderness, but most of the land in Palestine was cultivated. Now, Mawat land is important because when the Israelis came to conquer Palestine, before they formed the state of Israel in April 48, when the Zionist occupation started of Palestine, they worked on that law to twist it. Before we reach that, we can say by the time the British Mandate started, all the land subject to cultivation were cultivated by Palestinians. The Land Commission, the British Land Commission of 1920, just immediately after the start of the British Mandate, estimated there are 3,750 kilometers of Beersheba land are cultivated. The Land Commission has stated in their report that there are close to 4,000 kilometers of land being cultivated. So when the British Mandate came, there was a question by Herbert Samuel, the Zionist British High Commissioner, about the land in Palestine. And so British colonial minister, minister of colonial colonies, none other than Winston Churchill, came to Palestine, and he met several personalities in Jerusalem in March 1921, and he assured them that their property is preserved and protected. One of the people he met, Churchill, in Jerusalem in March 1921, was my own father. And he assured him, together with others, that British government will protect their customs and practices and ownership of land. This document I show it to you in document 2. Document 2. Here it is. It said that Churchill has met with Beersheba leaders and assured them that their property, their customs, their ownership of land and so on will be not interfered with. So here we have now another document which shows that our land is there and we own that land. When Herbert Samuel came, he came, of course, with Zionist schemes. In the 5 years of his tenure in 1920 to 1925, he actually set the foundations of the State of Israel. He emulgated 100 bylaws in fact, to plant Zionist colonization in Palestine. Many of these are well known to you, but the most important one is that he set up the Haganah as a force. He set up a new legislative council only for Jews, where the Arabs did not have one, and so on. But Herbert Samuel tried to reenact or rechange the Mawat land and claim that Palestinians in Beersheba do not have ownership because their land is Mawat. And the surprising thing, not surprising actually, the damning fact is that the British government during its 30 years of mandate never accepted that notion. And they kept the ownership of Palestinians in Beersheba intact. They paid taxes and they followed the regular rules anywhere in Palestine. In 1936 to 1939, there was, as you know, the big revolt against the British administration because it allowed Jewish immigrants from Europe to come to Palestine. And the end of that, as a way of conciliation, the British government stopped the Jewish immigration or promised to stop the Jewish immigration to Palestine. Moreover, they acted a new law called Land Transfer Regulations of 1940. Under this law, it was not allowed that Jews will own any land in Beersheba. It is not permissible to have Jews to have land in Beersheba by sale or by any means. So that was prohibited by law from 1940. The Jewish settlers tried to sneak into that, and they took some land from some people who claimed it to be their own. Lord Oxford, who was the district commissioner of Beersheba at the time, sat at a court in which the Jewish settlers claimed to have land. And they said, come on, prove that you can have land because the law says you cannot have land. And they did not show up on the land. Of course, they took it in 1948 by force. So during the 30 years of British mandate, there was no possibility that Jewish settlers can take land. They claimed to have 60,000 dunams out of 12,577,000 dunams, which is very small portion. Now, to show you that the land was owned by people, I can show you the map, which we have created from records. And you can see every piece of land in Beersheba is owned. This is a PowerPoint, you can run it. Owned by some family or some village. Each color belongs to a certain family. There are 88 villages here, and you can see the outline of the land owned by each party. After Israel took all this land by force, JNF has made a fictitious sales deal with Ben Gurion of 2 million dunams. Fictitious because Ben Gurion doesn't own the land, and JNF, of course, doesn't own it either. The purpose of that was to avoid the application of Resolution 194, and so they gave JNF land next to Gaza and next to Lebanon and next to Jerusalem, so that refugees would not return. In spite of that, 2 million, JNF took land which is not part of this agreement, and they took land in the heart of Beersheba land. And here I show you, can we see the number 4? Here I show you Wadi Gaza leading to Gaza. They built a park called Eshkol Park in the name of the previous Israeli prime minister. And this land here is taken from the villages of Abu Daher, Abu Bakra, and you can see the blue line is the limit of the Eshkol Park, and the other colors are the land of the villages taken over by JNF from their land. So we have then a great case of a robbery by so-called charity organization, and this is going on. If there is any proof, here is some of it. I keep saying, and I repeat again, I find it pathetic that I have to explain that to Russian Polish settlers on my land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for sticking to time. That was really illuminating, Dr. Salman. Thank you very much indeed. We now move straight to the next speaker, and I'm really happy that Dr. Ahmed Amara is joining us. He's a lecturer at the NYU Tel Aviv and a senior researcher at the Human Rights Clinic at Al-Quds University. His research and expertise focuses on law, history, and geography in historic Palestine, including Beersheba. And I have to tell you that when I spoke to Dr. Salman just before we start, when I spoke to him, he said Beersheba, not Naqab. And that's an important thing that I learned, even as a Palestinian, that we use the name, but actually it is the lands of Beersheba. That's really very, very important. Okay, so over to you, Dr. Amara. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Indeed, let's start with the terminology. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for organizing this and other important talks. Although the map here has the Negev, but me and Dr. Salman, we agree that the native geography talks about different geopolitical units, and the Negev was never one of them in a Palestinian context. We are talking about Bir al-Sab'a, we are talking about Bilad Ghazi, when Ghazi was the central town for the southern Palestinian region, going on to today's Jordan and Sinai. So it's very important to rework these geographical units. And actually, in fact, even the Bedouin term is not even the local commonly used term 100 years ago. If I look at Ottoman documents, and my research focuses on Ottoman law, Ottoman land law, this is what I will get into very soon. But looking at the Ottoman documents, I never found the word Bedouin. They either talk about the Urban, or the Urban themselves talking about themselves as the Arab, right? So with the terminology, it's very important, because together with this terminology, there is an evolving discourses and representations about, for example, either nomadism or the land is awaiting a redemption to bloom as the Negev desert, although according to Zionist estimates even, let alone the British and the local estimates, we're talking about 3 to 4 million dunams that were cultivated until 1948. We're talking about 60,000 tons of barley a year that were exported through Gaza to the UK, actually, for the beer industry. And that's the vast majority of it is what's called Bedouin cultivation in the Negev. So that's very important background in order to lead to the legal argument. And sorry, I'll get a little bit to what Dr. Salman explained about the Ottoman and the British in the 8 minutes maybe that I have left. Anyway, just to give the context, so there is southern Palestine, and after 1948, only 13,000 of almost 95,000 of the Palestinians in southern Palestine remained inside Israel. They were displaced from this very fertile lands and other lands, either expelled outside the region, but those who remained, the 13,000, were all concentrated in this area that called the Sayag, which is the exception or the fenced area. To jump into, let's see if I can, to the 1970s very fast. Actually, most of the lands were confiscated by Israel under different laws, but with those lands that were held by the local population, Israel kept pushing the idea of formally confiscating these lands. Let me try just to move to the other map. Here we go. In the 1970s, Israel declared the lands that you see here, it's called the Sayaj area that we saw in the earlier map, declared this under the land title settlement process, right? Where people claim and ask to register their title to the land. Now we're talking about 3,220 land claims that were filed by Palestinians of Bir al-Saba. And they stretched over an area of 1.5 million dunams because 2 other million dunams were confiscated under different laws. What happened that the Israeli authorities established a committee, and that was then its conclusion approved by the court. And this is what's known as the dead Negev Doctrine, which is the Mawat land that Dr. Salman talked about, and I'll explain based on this legal discourse. And we know the Israeli authorities focus and care very much about undertaking their policies within a legalistic approach that sheds some legitimization and legitimation on their act. So in this case, we're not talking about a new Israeli legislation like confiscation or land appropriation in the Galilee, for example, the absentees property law or the land acquisition law. So here we're talking about reworking and manipulating Ottoman and British laws and interpreting them in a way that leads to the land disposition, at the same time denying this act of confiscation. So what is Mawat land? Under Article 6 of the Ottoman Land Code from 1858, it's a land which is not under the use of anyone, that was not dedicated for the public, and it lies at a distance where the voice of a loud man from the farthest inhabited place doesn't reach. Or it's a 30 minutes walk from the outskirts of the town, or it's an estimate of 1.5 miles. So already we can see the type of definition of Mawat land. Now, the main difference in the Ottoman versus the British, or let's say modern approach, is that under this article 103 from the Ottoman Land Code, anyone who cultivates these land, they own them. So they are, the concept even that the category of state land does not exist, right? These are all public lands. They're open for the public. Anyone who comes, make them productive, they get title to them. The British working together with the Zionists and under their also obligations, so-called under the mandate, because Article 6 required them to allocate wasteland and state land to the Jewish Agency and for Zionist settlements. So they looked to increase their control over the land. And in this case, they made just this ordinance. What we see here are the 6 lines of British ordinance legislation that says from now on, anyone who wants to cultivate such mawat land has to get a prior consent or approval from the British authorities. Anyone who doesn't do so will be deemed trespasser. And to make the transition, they give 2 months to anyone who claims rights to come and register them. Now, taken together, what we see, the Mawad, the Ottoman Land article, this British ordinance, the Israeli courts came and said, here is what's gonna happen. Mawat land, it's only what lies 1.5 miles. To measure the distance, a Bedouin village or a Bedouin encampment does not constitute a legitimate point to measure the distance from. And we're talking about a modern village, according to the Israeli courts. It has to be a modern, in a way, village, not even an inhabited area. And such village or town should have existed back in 1858. Now, none of this exists in the law. In fact, it's all like a smart way really to dispossess through a legalistic approach. Now, at the end, the judges said Bedouin had only the 2 months period to come and register their land in 1921. They did not do so, and thus they have to blame only themselves. And this entire thing is wrapped within a discourse that, come on, Bedouin are nomads. They never cultivated the land. And we know under the Ottoman Land Code, the basic practice that gives you rights is to cultivate the land. Anyone who cultivates lands for 10 years under the Ottoman Land Law gets a title to it. Anyone who makes a land that it's not productive, turns it to productive, gets a right to it. Here, they turned it upside down, and we know they're all also enmeshed in a context of Zionist discourse that only the Zionists or the state or the JNF in this case can make the desert bloom, make it green, and so on. Now, this is not new. The Mawat land argument was brought by Ben Gurion himself in 1935. As you can see, he approached also the mandate government asking for land allocation for Jewish settlements. And here, I don't know if you can see where they say the cultivable lands in the Beersheba sub-district are regarded as belonging to the Bedouin, to the local population from time immemorial. Now, what happens is that the Israeli government started since 2005 in particular with a plan that it's called the Negev Development Plan, right? And anytime we're talking about anything with development, you should read their Judization. And in this case, 2005, we have the Negev Development Plan talking about the direction of new Israeli settlements. And a lot of budgets are allocated there also to protect and guard state lands from the Bedouin. And second, also to enforce. There's like a special budget for law enforcement. And law enforcements mean plowing the land and also house demolitions in the Negev. Now, this is the last episode that we have been seeing. Legally speaking, since 2005, all of these cases and claims that were filed in the 70s, and Israel refused to decide on them, they started to bring these cases back to the court in 2005, counterclaiming the rights and the claims of the applicants. And guess what? 100% of these cases, we're talking about nearly 600 cases in the court that were won by the state, a total of 100% winning these cases. Now, everybody knows, as you said, the JNF themselves purchased from different families or Arabs in the past lands in Bir Sabi'. And a special Israeli committee, even in the 50s, that was headed by Yosef Weitz, and with this I will end, I see the time, that stated And Yosef White, just a note, he was the head of the forestation department of the JNF. In 1956, he stated in a secret document to the Israeli government that we cannot deny Bedouin rights to their lands. How come can we do that when they have cultivated the land and when the JNF themselves purchased land in the past? Today, all of these lands, even when they're contested and they're still counterclaiming about them, the state treats them as its own, and then they go to the JNF. And second, this whole thing erases the history, tries to erase the geography, and above all, criminalizes the presence of the Palestinian Arab Bedouins on Bir al-Sabi, on their land, treating them as trespassers on their ancestral lands, and we have seen, as we have seen by Dr. Salman Abu Sitta. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for adding to the richness of what we've learned. I think for a lot of people, including me, this has been really deep, an enhancement of our deep knowledge of the situation. Please, if you have a question that will come to towards the end of the webinar, can you post it directly to me, and then I'll do them in the order that they came in, or take groups of questions that ask about the same thing. Okay, so I'm really pleased now to move to our next speaker, who is Budour Hassan, a legal researcher at the Jerusalem Legal Aid and Human Rights Center. I mentioned to Budour just before you started, I first saw her in Sheikh Jarrah with the demonstrations that were resisting the attempt to evict families, to get from the court an order to evict them. So I'm really pleased that Budour is with us tonight. So Budour, over to you.
I will start from where Dr. Ahmed finished, with a verse from a poem by Native American poet Natalie Diaz. She writes, "An American way of forgetting natives, discover them with city, crumble them by city, erase them into cities named for their bones until you are the new natives of your new cities." And this is not just an American way of erasing natives, it's also an Israeli way of erasing Palestinian indigenous people, not just erasing them into invented cities, but also erase them through the planting of pine forests non-indigenous to this land, and by claiming that they're greenwashing this land in order to expel and erase Palestinians. And this is precisely why Palestinians in the area of Bir al-Sabi, especially in the villages of Al-Atrash and Al-Sa'we, have been protesting. They're not simply protesting against plans by the JNF to plant trees in order to expel them and prevent them from living there, but they're also protesting against a pattern. They're protesting against an ongoing pattern, actually, since 1948. Is what we are seeing right now, what the JNF is trying to do through the erasure of Palestinians, through the planting of these trees, has been done after 1948 on the ruins of the depopulated Palestinian, the hundreds of depopulated Palestinian villages on the western outskirts of Jerusalem. Plant these trees as an attempt to change and recreate the identity of these lands and say that these people have never existed, and pretend that this is Israel rather than Palestine. And this is why these protests are so important. These are not simply what we've been seeing in the all these people, especially young people, young women and men in Al-Sa'wa and Al-Atrash and throughout Palestine who've joined them in solidarity and in support, actually. It's not an automatic or not a spontaneous protest. It's a result of an accumulation of protests. We all remember that in 2013, when there was a Praver plan by Israel in order to depopulate dozens of Palestinians' villages and Naqab and again Bir al-Sabi, and again erase them into cities under the specious pretext of urbanization, development, and modernization. And as Dr. Ahmed said, these are just code names for Judaization. We've seen how these people came together in order to protest against the Praver plan, and they actually managed to topple the Pravir plan because of the protests and the uprising that managed to draw people from all over Palestine who joined in support. This is precisely what we've been seeing since the end of 2021 and through the start of this year. And what Israel's response to these protests is telling: the arbitrary detentions, the brutal repression of these protests says all we need to know about how Israel, the danger that Israel thinks that these protests and these protesters pose for it. Just today, as we're speaking, Palestinian young women and men are still protesting outside the court of Bir Sabah in order to demand the liberation and the freedom of those people who were arrested during the protest 2 weeks ago. And they continue to be arrested. They continue to be denied their rights, their due process, because obviously we know that under Israeli occupation, even the courts, and especially the courts actually, are part and parcel of this system, of this colonial system that tries to criminalize Palestinian protests and criminalize even Palestinians' attempt to defend their lands. And it's very important also to see these protests that broke out in Sawa and Al-Atrash and over the area of Bir Sheva as part of the uprising that began in May, actually began in April in 2021. First, outside of Damascus Gate against Israel's measures of closing Damascus Gate before Palestinian youth during the month of Ramadan, and then which stretched and included Sheikh Jarrah, where Palestinians protested the forcible expulsion of dozens of families from Sheikh Jarrah, and continued also in Silwan, where also Palestinians are protesting against the expulsions in Silwan. The importance of the uprising in May stems or lies in the fact that it managed to unify Palestinians. It managed to erase this illusory, this fake dividing lines between the two sides of the green line, managed to bring Palestinians together in order to protest Israeli measures and to say that no matter where we exist on the hierarchy of Israeli repression, we're part of one resistance and we're under the same kind of settler colonialism that tries to erase us. And the response to the protests that broke out in December and that continue to take place against the JNF measures in Bir Sabah area is also telling that Palestinians understand the importance of linking these protests together. And why it's important to link these protests together, because the tactics that the JNF employs in Bir Sabah are very similar to the tactics that it has employed all over Palestine, that it also employs and wants to employ in Jerusalem, where under a new settlement of title and land procedure, under the pretext of registering land that Israel has prevented from being registered since 1967. So there is a process that has begun in 2018. Under this process, the JNF is planning to acquire 2,500 dunams in Jerusalem, registered in its names, and open it and pave the way for turning these Palestinian lands in the occupied part of in the eastern part of occupied Jerusalem, in order to allocate them for Jewish-only colonies. So this is, we see how these processes, how these patterns by the JNF link. There are similar plans, also similar acquisition plans in the West Bank as well, because these plans are copied from, as I said, from previous plans that were implemented and that they were tried in 1948. Lastly, I would just want to end with a couple of things. Israel has built its very existence on several myths. The myth of making the desert bloom is actually similar to the myth of the Wild West, which colonialist Americans also used, is one of those myths. And it actually, again, seeks to erase the Palestinian people. But it also builds its existence on a variety of legal myths. And both Dr. Salman and Dr. Ahmed highlighted this, how Israel is using the law and using legalistic measures, including myths such as present absentees and the absentee property and acquisition deals and all sorts of categorization and land registration, in order to put a legal veneer on the attempts of ethnically cleansing Palestinian people. And this is why it's very important not to fall in this trap and not to adopt Israel's legalistic measures and to call things how they should be called. And the second important thing is to understand the JNF for what it is. I've had many liberal Zionist organizations decry the recent attempts by the GNF to acquire lands in Jerusalem and the West Bank by claiming that this does not represent the vision of the JNF and the Zionist vision, as though the Zionist vision was good at the start and later was deformed. The vision of the JNF and the Zionist vision from the start was a vision built on ethnic cleansing and erasure. It was never a good-willing vision. It was never a vision for liberation. The Zionist vision has always been predicated upon the expulsion of Palestinians. And this is why Zionism all over Palestine, not just in Jerusalem and the West Bank, it's all over Palestine. It's linked to this attempt to uproot Palestinians from their land. So there is no way that the JNF will be eroding or will be deforming its vision by acting in the West Bank. It's only living up to its previous vision that is predicated upon ethnic cleansing and expulsion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really excellent. The way you brought everything together and reminded us of the sort of the Israeli policy across the board. It's not just a policy in the West Bank or in East Jerusalem or in the Negev. It's all over, including in Jaffa, where houses are demolished. Palestinians are being pushed out from Jaffa because they're making the rents so expensive that some of them may have to move out, which is another factor. So thank you very much indeed, Budour. I will say, if I may, in relation to Sheikh Jarrah, another person that I want to mention is Murad Atiyah. Murad Atiyah is one of the people who were instrumental in the resistance, if you like, in Sheikh Jarrah. He was eventually taken into custody on the 10th of August, and he's had his detention extended repeatedly. This is now going to be extended, I think, for another month. The accusation is quite bizarre, if there is an accusation, in that they say that under the siege that Sheikh Jarrah had, in his house, he met with representatives of all the factions. I mean, the Israelis were checking all the passes, letting people in and seeing who comes out, but that's what they claim. The reason I mentioned Murad is yet another example of they're using him in a way to deter others. We'll stick you in prison if you stand up for your rights in any part of Palestine. The other reason is, first of all, Amal Nakhli, who I mentioned at the beginning, is the son of a really good friend of mine in Palestine. But Murad is actually the son of my direct cousin. So one of the families in Sheikh Jarrah who are facing the threat of eviction is the Atiyah family, and Jamal Atiyah, his dad, is my direct cousin. And as you can imagine, for him to be detained simply for resisting in Sheikh Jarrah, resisting peacefully. He's an Arabic language teacher, was about to submit his dissertation, and then he was held in detention, and his family, I think I've only seen him once. So it is various things. Yes, the law, the settlers, etc., but it's also trying to deter any Palestinians who stand up for their rights. And that's what they're doing in the case of Murad Atiyah. In the case of Amal Nakhli, nobody knows what he's accused of because it's a secret file. So nobody can find out what it is. And that's why administrative detention is so terrible. Thank you for the questions coming in. Please put more into the chat directly to me. We now come to what we are doing in the UK. The JNF has been mentioned by the three speakers as an important actor in what happens in terms of this disposition of the Palestinians. I'm really pleased that we've got Annie O'Gara, who's going to brief us on what is happening in the UK. Annie, thanks very much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, and it's a privilege to share a platform with such distinguished Palestinian comrades. A key point I want to stress about what's happening today in the Negev and Jerusalem is that this is nothing new for the JNF. Their mission from 1901 through to today has been to acquire Palestinian land, remove Palestinians from that land, settle Jewish people on it, and reserve the benefits in perpetuity and exclusively for Jewish people, fulfilling the JNF's role as an agent of settler colonialism. And when Gideon Levy wrote his article, The Jewish National Fund for Apartheid, he said, "We must get to know the JNF, meaning understanding and exposing their mission fully." And I agree. I've been part of the Stop the JNF campaign only since 2018, and I joined a strong group of seasoned campaigners. And one of our core objectives is to expose what the JNF exists to do and is still doing, and to campaign against them in partnership with Palestinians. And I think that the centrality of the JNF to the Zionist mission is not yet sufficiently understood in the UK outside of the core solidarity movement. And that's a job for us all to undertake. We target primarily the JNF UK, but it's important to emphasise that all JNF branches worldwide are part of the same family, an outsourced arm of the Israeli state and complicit in what's happening on the ground. And the JNF UK may make strenuous efforts to claim its independence, but there's ample evidence it's not independent. The JNF UK even says that it is 100% Israel, and the Jewish News recently called JNF UK the Israeli charity. So of course the JNF family is deeply immersed in what's happening on the ground. And as Budour said, it's now taken its mask off and openly proclaimed that it will acquire land in Jerusalem and across the Green Line, whereas before it's operated through shady subsidiaries such as Himnuta. And Palestinians are indeed being evicted from their homes with appalling brutality, and hence the call from a range of Palestinian organisations to mobilise in support this weekend, endorsing the call and acting in solidarity and against targets like the JNF. We'll be out in Sheffield on Friday, and I would urge everybody here to organise for this weekend. Coinciding with this, there'll be a letter coming out from Stop the JNF and PSC for mass signatures, mentioning the Mond and Hayek furore, but focusing on the core mission of the JNF, which is much bigger than either of these two, and which wouldn't be changed if they were removed. So transfers are a violation of international law, but the erasure goes further because Palestinians are being evicted from their history and their geography. Archaeology in East Jerusalem is politicised in the so-called City of David as excavations dig through layers of history, discarding evidence from the Palestinian past to find some link to the biblical character David to legitimise or try to Israeli colonisation. And in the Negev, it's a similar process of replacement, but with trees to supplant people, not a theme park. And we've worked with activists in the Negev who emphasise the loss of their homes, but also the attempted eradication of a way of life and a connection to the land that stood the test of time. And believe it or not, JNF UK says on its website that its work in the Negev, which is an absolutely major funding project for it, is in a politically uncomplicated area, and that their focus on the Negev would not engage matters of political controversy. Now, we've challenged all that through the Charity Commission and the fundraising regulator, and before COVID stopped, combined with that with speaking tours and demonstrations, a kind of twin track approach, what we've found is that the British establishment is very resistant, but people are not. So there was a lot of work for COP26, using our partnerships with comrades in Stop the Wall and Palestinian environmental NGOs, PENGON. And that work goes on this year, putting the JNF's environmental destruction of Palestine onto the agenda again. And someone in the team is already working on water apartheid. The JNF claims to be a force for environmental good and a benefit to climate change. But dense green canopies, like in the Atir forest in the Negev, starve the forest floor of light, eliminate indigenous species and add to global warming. They don't help at all. And those forest fires that we saw in the Jerusalem hills showed the danger of the JNF planting and ironically revealed the beauty and the symmetry of the pre-existing terracing of Palestinian farmers. So our focus is grassroots mobilisation in partnership with Palestinian comrades. And this webinar really, really helps. I've mentioned the environmental work, and a new set of Stop the JNF actions relates to the parks and forests of the JNF. 46 of their 68 parks and forests cover ethnically cleansed, stolen Palestinian lands, and these are currently being mapped by Dr. Salman. And one of the 46 is called British Park, covering the lands of 7 Palestinian villages, implicating us who live in Britain in the JNF's crimes. We launched the campaign very recently, and we have an integrated team here with UK activists and partners in Badil, Stop the Wall, and Zochrot. And we're making contacts with branches and groups to get that work going. A friend of mine asked if this was a campaign about something in the past, not connected with today, but of course it's not. The descendants of those refugees are still alive and claiming their right of return. And of course, we connect the crime of British Park to the JNF's actions today in the Negev and Jerusalem, because it exposes the repeat pattern, the serial offence pattern of land theft, home wrecking, and the undermining of a whole people's identity, or rather the attempt to undermine it. And I'm particularly glad that it opens up the whole area of British state complicity, with Dr. Ahmad has spoken about earlier, and Dr. Salman as well. So it invites us as citizens to take action and expose and reject the JNF. Other comrades in Stop the JNF based in Scotland are working on the Balfour Forest, which lies over Al Mujadil village. And that's an amazing and inspirational story of a mixed village where Christian Palestinians were given the chance to return. I think the Pope stuck his oar in, but without their Muslim neighbours, and they refused. We're also working on the Coretta King Forest, which hides the notorious massacre of Ain al-Zaytun, and it offers us a chance of linking with anti-racist groups internationally. And links already have been formed with Palestinians in Syria on that particular project. So the key element in all these actions is building solidarity between activists here and partners in Palestine. And I'm very excited about this for 2022. And I'll end just by showing you a slide which exposes the ambitions of the JNF UK and the ambitions of Israel. Clearly, Palestine is eliminated here from the map, and instead names of British towns and cities have been plastered across it, an insult to everybody who cares about Palestine. And these are the towns and cities that we are concentrating our attention on at the moment. Thank you very much, Kamal, and I hope I haven't run too far over.
Thank you so much. This has been really helpful because it brings it to what we can do here in the UK. And there have been a couple of questions specifically about that, which I'll come back and put to you. There was a question for Ahmed related to when there are sort of demolitions in the Negev. Where does the JNF, is it involved, or is it the Israeli police who are involved? Is there anything you can say about that, just so people can understand? When they hear headlines, I think Al-Araqib has been demolished for the 190th time or something, either today or yesterday. So where does how is JNF seen in that area as acting?
Yeah. First of all, we should note that the body that draws Israel land policies is the Israel Land Authority. And in the council, the Israel Land Council has members of the JNF who draw Israel's land policies. Now, second, the demolitions, or let's say that the regulations of the space and geography, etc., and Bir al-Sab'a now is taking place according to a metropolitan zoning plan, which includes new Jewish settlements. It relates to the concentration of the Bedouin unrecognized villages, and with that, to areas that are subject or intended for forestation. So there is this link in, for example, in some of the villages, these demolitions or the plowing of the lands, the act itself takes place by the police or different enforcement units, right? There's the Green Patrol, there is a special police unit called the UAV police unit, very aggressive unit that we saw in Al-Atrash and in Sawi. But it's not JNF personnel who are undertaking these acts, but they prepare the ground for the JNF to enter the scene and start deforestation. Like in Al Araqib area, there's like the ambassador's forest, right? That it's started on the land of Al Araqib and intended to cover larger areas.
There are also a couple of questions related to the JNF, so maybe Annie can help with them. I'm just going to bring them up. Where are we? I think basically the essence of them is for it to be a charity is indefensible. So how is it that the Charity Commission continues to say this is a charity? What's, if you like, what sort of excuses have they given for that?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's truly shocking. Dr. Salman showed us one of his ownership documents of land, and one of the cases that we took in 2018 was the case of a young Palestinian refugee who grew up in Ida, but her home is in Ajur, which is under British Park. And she had documents of ownership. She had tax documents. She had that dates back to when her parents lived there and before then. And they used the issue of standing to not even scrutinize those documents. So we never got, they turned it down, and they said that we couldn't take it to appeal because the person concerned and the other people in the case didn't have this concept of legal standing. We've also had the most amazing statement from the Charity Commission to a supporter who challenged the charitable status of the JNF UK. And in writing back, an officer from the Charity Commission said that the test for charitable status was a test of what a charity was set up to do, not what it does in practice. And I mean, I don't know why I'm smiling when I say that. I think it's just so gobsmackingly unbelievable that as long as they're saying that you have got your ducks in a row and you've set out your charitable objectives appropriately, that's all that they're interested in. But of course, we know from some of the investigations that have been carried on of other charities that they are very much interested in what people do. One final point I'll make is that that case went to a first-tier tribunal, and during it, the Charity Commission barrister actually said that the JNF UK may have violated the legal rights of Ms. Al-Ajama's family, but that to remove the JNF's charitable status would not materially affect her claim. And again, our barrister had put forward the notion of incremental justice, that it's a very important step to say that a charity who may have violated the legal rights of a family should not be a charity. But they got off the hook with that one as well. And that's why we're thinking that we're not giving up on it, not at all, but we are thinking that we need to do a lot more in terms of getting a body of public support behind us before we go again, and to perhaps find some specialist advice on charity law that will help. I hope that makes sense, Kamel.
Yeah, there was a question about the whether the branch here is basically linked to the, I'm sorry, I forgot the acronym, the KCC, is it that's on the ground there? Someone help me with the acronym, I've just forgotten it.
The KKL.
The KKL,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Is the branch here, you know, the UK branch of the JNF, does it work closely? Is it the same? I think that was the question.
Yeah, well, if I may, I'll give my perspective. Yes, it is. It's part of the same family. They had a fallout over funding, and when Samuel Hayek, when they healed the rift, Samuel Hayek said that JNF UK had re-entered the global family of the KKL JNF. Okay. JNF UK is listed as a branch by KKL, and there are several other links that I could mention, but yes, they are absolutely part and parcel.
Thank you. Budour, you've had your hand up patiently for a while, so please do speak.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to disconnect my video because of internet problems. I just forgot in my presentation to mention one thing. I want to acknowledge the contribution of a comrade who has unfortunately left us, Suha Jarrar. Suha was a prominent Palestinian environmentalist who always fought also against attempts of the JNF to greenwash the Israeli settler colonialism. And Suha was active around issues of climate justice, of environmental justice, and highlighted the issue of Israel's environmental apartheid against the Palestinian people. I think Suha's loss in this fight is immeasurable, but what we as Palestinians can do in order to live up to her legacy and is only to continue his fight, and part of continuing her fight is to fight against the JNF and to combat the JNF efforts to ethnically cleanse Palestine. And my second comment is a personal one. I have a relative who, on whose land the JNF built a park, one of its parks, and he's an elderly 80-year-old man. And he told me, he said, the JNF, they want me ككال بدهم يعني أدفع مصاري عشان أفوت على أرضي. The JNF want me to pay an admission fee in order to enter this land on which they built a park. I will die over, I'd rather die over paying money, admission fee to the body that expelled me and that turned my land into parks. And I think this is what he taught his children, and this is what he taught his grandchildren, is not simply an act of empty nostalgia, remembrance, and telling your children and your grandchildren that this area where the JNF planted its parks used to be our land and will return to be our land, is again a very important part of mapping, as Dr. Salman would put it, mapping our return.
Thank you so much. There are a couple of questions, Dr. Salman. I'll come to him at the end, if I may, because I'm going to ask him about one of the things he's produced, which is really important. There was a comment here for Annie O'Gara, and it says, charitable status. Private Eye magazine has questioned charitable status of organizations in the past based on their actions. So in a way, why not this one? I guess, I don't think it needs an answer. A question, can someone tell me what the KKL stands for? If anyone can help me, that would be great. Sorry?
Keren Kayemet Israel, which is the Hebrew word for the Jewish National Fund, or the...
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful. There was a question about, I think for Ahmed, is anyone developing a map of all these parks that the JNF is sponsoring? So can people see where they are being made? I don't know if Ahmed can help with that. And then I'll go to Dr. Salman in a minute. But Ahmed, are you able to answer that question? If you
actually, we in the zoning plan we see actually what's intended and allocated for forestation or green nature reserves in the future. But I guess the JNF themselves have a map of their achievements,
of their proud achievements. Yes. Okay. Thank you. I mean, obviously, as PSC, we're very happy to be part of the Stop the JNF coalition, and generally, Annie briefs us on developments very regularly, so that's really quite a helpful thing. Budour, did you want to say something more? Your hand is still up.
No, it's raised from the start. I'm good.
Okay. But thank you, Budour. I mean, Dr. Salman, I think that there's a question about the US. If you are able to comment, why does the US continue to support? I know this is a big question, it needs a lot of time, but then I'd like you to tell us about your current and sort of future projects. We know that you produced particularly atlases of Palestine, and for those of you who are interested, they're available from the PSC website if anyone wants to buy one. So I think twofold. The issue of America and its support, we hear, and I don't know if that's something you're aware of, but they're looking in America as to how to not have tax deductible sort of contributions to the JNF. But it's a wider question, I think. But I think in particular, if you could tell us more about the projects that you are working on currently.
Thank you, Kamil. If I may rephrase your questions in a slightly different way. Ahmed Amara just mentioned about mapping of JNF. I'm pleased to tell you we are 3/4 on the way to produce Atlas JNF robbery of land. We have charted 60 JNF parks, and we outlined them where they are, and we have computed the area taken by each village, and we also have the names of the owners of this land, and we also know where these people are, the owners of the stolen land, living now in which refugee camp. So we have all the elements of a court case taken up by individual people of each land taken over by JNF. But let me take advantage of this wonderful people listening to us now and say how we can really expose the crimes of JNF. There are two ways to do that. One, of course, is international law. International law already has, since 2001, censored under its treaty-based committees, censored JNF for practicing discrimination, apartheid, and all that. So the international law judgment is very clear. It's in fact, every year it has been affirmed. What shall we do then, since the United Nations doesn't have a police force, even it does, the United States will prevent it. What can we do? We go back to the local laws, domestic laws, in which JNF is registered. Take, for example, JNF. I know that Annie knows a lot about the Scottish group contesting the registration of JNF under domestic law. Is that if their work charity, they claim publicly they are practicing apartheid. And the United Kingdom says they are against apartheid as a crime against humanity. Why there is no British court action on that? The reason is that they have shut down, in some cases, the applicant. They say that you have no standing. The British courts have never questioned or actually discussed whether JNF violating British laws or not. They have squashed the case before it came. And the reason for that, there is no enough public opinion to agitate in England and in Britain, for example, that to convert the political opinion or the public opinion into an instrument of law. They always deviate, the British courts, from passing a judgment on that, saying that it is not relevant, or the juror lady has no standing, or that kind of thing, but they never faced it. Why? Because there is no enough political awareness among the British public, and certainly not enough public activity, action, to make this into some kind of law or to some kind of general common sense among the British people that what JNF practices is actually crime against humanity. So this meeting tonight is very important in creating that public atmosphere or public opinion. I hope it continues. And thanks for PST for doing that.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Salman. I just want to mention, first of all, please do join PSC if you're not a member of the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Go to palestinecampaign.org. One of the things you'll get as well is that an email encouraging you to take e-action, to write to the Charity Commission. This will come out at the weekend, so please do sign up. So we're following this up with some more action. I mean, the challenge for us in the UK is huge, and we need to continue to stand up to basically to the British establishment. I mean, I'm just going to say to you that today, James Cleverly, was the Foreign Office Minister, was responding to a question from an SNP MP about demolitions of Palestinian homes. And he referred to the demolition of Palestinian homes as settlement demolitions. So settlement demolitions, really? The Palestinians are settlers? Now, you know, normally they're very well briefed, and when they stand up to answer a question, they read from notes, but it shows you the mentality, in a way, that the British government is so in support of the Israeli government that you have a minister who says that. We also heard last week in a discussion related to pensions that a person speaking, where we're challenging, PSC is challenging the pension fund managers about investments in complicit companies, and a person, one of the councillors who was involved, referred to Judea and Samaria instead of the occupied Palestinian territory. The whole issue is about complicity in the occupation. And so there's a lot of work to us, and we can, you know, we need to be even stronger. The PSC working with partners, you know that we're working with this particular action against the JNF, but also working with partners who held the demonstration on Friday, and others working to oppose the intention of the government to change the law related to boycotts. It's not necessarily the BDS per se, but the driving force very much is to try and protect Israel, complicit companies or companies complicit in Israeli crimes, and also other types of companies which are not related to Israel, that we work with the partners, and it is the strength of a campaign working with others that helps us to achieve results, and we will. I want to see if any of the speakers would like to have a last word before we close. Ahmed, do you have anything, do you want to comment further?
No, I just want to thank you, Kamil, and thank Rivka and everyone. Thank you
so much. Budour, is there a message from people who are taking up the protests and so on that you'd like to bring to us?
No, I just want to say that it was really a privilege sharing a platform with Dr. Ahmed, and especially Dr. Salman, whom I have respected for a long time and learned so much from. And yes, I guess the main message is that people here will continue to resist. It's not a foregone conclusion, of course, but for a century really, Palestinians have been resisting British colonialism and Israeli settler colonialism, and they'll continue to do so because we have no other land. It's our land, and we have no other alternative but to resist in order to stay here. And this is what we'll continue to do.
Thank you so much. And you've really presented your viewpoints so eloquently. We're really thankful to you. And I hope we'll be hosting you again in the future in PSC. Annie, do you want to add anything before we close?
No, just to say it's been a really enlightening webinar, and thanks for inviting me to it. I've enjoyed it. I feel much more energized now than I did at the start of the day, and that's because of getting in contact with these great Palestinian comrades.
Well, again, thank you all very much indeed for attending. Thank you, Dr. Salman, Dr. Ahmed, to Budour, and to Annie, and to the PSC staff working in the background, making this possible at such short notice. It is important that we keep up the fight here in the UK, because the people are with us. 250,000 came out in demonstrations last summer. On Friday, hundreds of people came out at very short notice to stand outside the Israeli embassy and to say, we know what you're doing. What you're doing is the committal of more crimes, and we'll stand up for the Palestinian people until they achieve freedom, justice, and equality. Thank you all very much indeed.
Let me say, Kamel, let people of good conscience speak up. To be silent, you side with the aggressor. So don't be silent. Speak up, speak up. Let people of good conscience speak up.
Thank you, Salman. And the last word was Salman's, and rightly so. Thank you very much indeed, and goodbye.